Greetings, listeners. Howard and I spoke with a very special guest. He is the firm-wide chairman and managing partner of an AM Law 100 firm. Today, we discuss the firm's recent law firm mergers. We discuss the firm's market positioning and strategy. We learned this law firm has grown revenues 550% and headcount of 350% in 9 years. And they are not done yet. Enjoy. Welcome, everyone, to the Future is Bright podcast. My name is Chris Batts, and joined by my co-host, Howard Rosenberg. Howard and I are at the center of law firm talent and strategic growth here in New York City. Howard is a partner and the head of talent intelligence and acquisitions in Barrett's and Brunel, and I advise and facilitate corporate law firm mergers at Columbus Street. And today, we have a very exciting guest, Bob Hicks, chairman and managing partner of Taft Stettinius Hollister. Bob, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Nice to see you guys.
So, Bob, you and your firm have been blasting the headlines with some very exciting announcements this year. I believe Denver, Sherman and Howard was a firm that joined?
Yeah, they joined us January 1, 2024. They were from Denver, the oldest firm in Colorado, third biggest in Denver. It was a great merger for us and great people.
And then you recently picked up or announced Morris Manning?
Morris Manning in Atlanta and Washington, D.C., just a tremendous, almost 50-year-old firm. You know, we see them at the top of the scale in Atlanta, certainly for being a really first-rate middle market firm. You have to define middle market. We define it largely by sophisticated work that's priced in the range where Taft is today. And they're also just a terrific group of people, just a great reputation. Then they also had about 25 lawyers in Washington, D.C. with a very sophisticated practice. So they fit us really well.
That's excellent. And then I know you guys announced about a firm in South Florida, a litigation firm, correct?
Yeah, so the Maverick firm, it was this 18-person litigation boutique, just super high-end, lawyers, highly rated, all board certified partners under Florida law. You'd be hard-pressed to find better litigators in Florida. And, Florida's a strategic market for us largely because many of our clients have actually moved to Florida more than half of the year. They're trying to, there's a lot of reasons. One of them's tax, another one's politics, and I think the compelling one is sunshine. They like it in the winter. So we kind of want to be where our clients are, and to not be there felt like it was a strategic mistake on our part. So we've been looking for 5 years and found a great bunch of guys.
And Bob, what's next on the radar screen in terms of geographic location for you guys?
Well, that's really interesting. So we've actually exceeded our own expectations about being able to find terrific law firms throughout the United States. Our model is to become hopefully the leading national middle market firm in the United States. That model has sort of morphed. We originally were going to become the regionally dominant one in the Middle West, and we feel like we've largely accomplished that. We're in 7 of the 9 largest Midwestern markets. So our expansion to Sherman and Howard was a move to the Mountain West, which was one of our targeted regions, and on a strategic plan that we laid out years ago. And Morris Manning was in Florida, the Maverick firm. They were first moves into the Southeast region. So the other 2 regions that we really have deep interest in are the Northeast corridor and then the Southwest. We're kind of in the Southwest already when you look at the fact that with the Sherman and Howard merger, we picked up a great office in Phoenix that we're growing very rapidly. That would take us to Texas probably, I think is high on the radar screen, probably Dallas and Houston. And certainly New York has been high on our radar. Unfortunately, when we do mergers, they have to fit us 3 ways. Culturally, which is a hugely important feature at Taft. I mean, I think our culture really drives everything. It also has to fit us economically, both from a rate and a sort of how we do income for partners. And it has to fit us from a client perspective. We have to really match up on those things. So I always like to say we kiss a lot of toads, and maybe those toads think that we're a toad. I don't know. I just never am arrogant enough to think that one of us is right or one of us is wrong. I think it's more about finding the right fit and match. Kind of like getting married. It's about as important from a business perspective. So I think you'll see us go in the Northeast corridor. You'll see us go in the Southwest corridor. And that just leaves open probably California, which is really its own world in many ways. So, and then we'll, of course, keep expanding our regions once we get there. And so that's our model. And so far, it's worked well.
And And Bob, are you trying to position the firm as a kind of a super firm in the mid-market space? Is that
Yes, I mean,
the landscape you're trying to occupy?
yeah, I mean, actually, I don't think there is a super firm in the middle market today. I think there's a lot of really good middle market firms that they're very dominant in a few geographies. I don't think anybody's done the national footprint for the middle market firms like the AmLaw 25 has done in the bulge bracket. So we kind of always say we want to be that firm that's a first mover doing it, and then be one of the dominant ones. I'd like to say the leading one. That's an arrogant statement, and I don't like complacency, and I don't like arrogance anywhere. Certainly, it would be our enemy in trying to become great. They say good is the enemy of great. So is arrogance, and so we have to keep challenging ourselves and be introspective and understand that there's going to be competition. There's going to be good competition, and we've got to go out and put a better platform together. So that's what we've been doing, and I think we're kind of in the pole position to do that. We're going to be at the end of this year, 1,200 lawyers, $1 billion in revenue, purely focused on the middle market pricing, which is today probably in the $400 to $1,300 hour range. That's probably nationally tier 3 pricing. If you look at tier 1 now exceeding $3,000 an hour, tier 2 exceeding $2,000 an hour for the top partners. So the tier 3 is sort of serving that middle market that's still very sophisticated, and it probably represents 80+% of the United States economy, though. So we feel like we're firmly embedded there. We're not trying to change lanes out of that pricing tier, but we want to put together a set of resources and a really tight-knit group of people that can deliver in that market the same way a Kirkland & Ellis or a Latham or someone would deliver in the bulge bracket market with the same kind of resources.
So where do you think you are on the spectrum? That are you at 60% complete on that vision of arrogance, or like what are the metrics look when you're kind of deeper into the game about trying to become that super firm in the mid market?
I think your 60% is pretty close, Howard. I mean, the problem with me, and everybody knows, as soon as we hit a bar, the bar gets raised. So I'm known for that. My mother used to, I think I wrote her obituary and it said, she gave out equal doses of love, discipline, and high expectations. And the high expectation seems to permeate me, and it permeates Taft today as a result of that. And every time we think we're going to achieve a benchmark, the benchmark moves upward. So I will tell you that, yeah, today I would say we're 60%, maybe even as far as 70%.
Okay.
But that line will probably move up because, first of all, the legal community keeps moving the line. Second of all, we will always be moving forward. I mean, if you're not moving forward, then you're moving backwards. And many people have quoted that and said that. I firmly believe in that. And I think organizations have to keep challenging themselves. So I would say for this model, where we are today, we're about 60 to 70% complete. I would say that will not be the end point for Taft. I mean, it will. The next generation will find a way to take it to the next level of the model.
So by that kind of projection, you're probably talking about, not that labels are important, but that's kind of like the AmLaw 30 kind of territory, probably, when this thing is all further down the line. Is that right?
Yeah, and that worries me a little bit. Like right now, there's this feeling that once you hit AmLaw 50, that you're a really high-priced firm. I don't think anybody like us has entered the AmLaw 50. And I could be wrong about that, but I haven't seen it. So, at the end of this year, we're probably going to be close to AmLaw 60, and I feel pretty comfortable there because it's got this sort of misleading concept that everybody's expensive when you get above a certain level. And I got to fight that for our business model. We're selling a high-value firm where it's the intersection of quality and price, and the service level and the responsiveness has got to be there. I worry that if we were AmLaw 30, people would they would perceive that we are too expensive. But may be unavoidable at some point. It's a revenues-driven list. AmLaw is. We're probably the 35th biggest by head count at the end of this year. I'm just guessing. I don't know the exact number, but it's probably in that range. And by head count, we may be in the 20s when we're done with this part of the model. I don't know about whether we'll ever hit it with revenues because we're not really the major market price firm, which will drive some of those revenues. That's a long answer to I don't really live for the AmLaw list. Once we entered the AmLaw 100, I think it gave us a lot of credibility just because people respect it. I do think we're in a nice spot today. It will keep growing, though, and we probably will keep rising on that list.
So, Bob, these conversations you've had with the three firms you mentioned and in the many others you did not mention, these deals are hard. They take work. It's very relational. There's a lot of trust building. But I would love to hear from you, what is the Taft way in making these deals work? Because every firm that goes about this has kind of a different approach, a different philosophy, and this might weave into some of what you're selling. But I'd like for my audience to understand what it's like to chat with Taft or what works.
Well, I always like to say I'm not nearly handsome or good looking enough to just have them fall over and say, hey, we want to join Taft. And I mean that metaphorically about Taft as well. I mean, we don't try and be the shiniest object. We're not trying to be the one that you'd look at and say, gosh, I've just got to be there. I mean, we actually try and find firms that are a great fit. It goes back to like getting married. You want to find the partner that is going to be most compatible with your views of life. And so when we do mergers, we kind of look at it from the other party's perspective first. Just like you would at any sale, you go, well, what's their need? And often their need is not that they don't know how to run a great firm. They've been around forever and they've done just a great job. What they need is the same thing all of us needed when we merged into Taft, and that was we needed a bigger platform. We needed more markets so we could draw talent to build better practice groups. We needed to be able to draw laterals to a platform that was a safe choice for them. And we wanted to be a safe choice for our clients. And so size and scale that's probably the number one factor that people look at for a perceived dominance or relevance in a market. If you went to a new market, you'd look at and say, I got to get this sophisticated work done. There's this mindset of going, well, who are the biggest firms there? Who are the most expensive firms there? And those things drive a perceived quality. So, the truth is we are the compilation of what is now going to be 9 terrific law firms plus the original Taft. So it's really, I think of Taft as being a new law firm that started in 2008 after having been in business for 125 years. We've all contributed these terrific local market firms that were succeeding greatly, but all were challenged by the things I just described. So Morris Manning's a great example. Almost a 50-year-old firm, top of their market in the middle market in Atlanta, super high quality reputation. Same would have been true of Sherman and Howard or Briggs and Morgan in Minneapolis. Really, every one of our firms, that was true. But they were challenged by the same thing of just being able to have a big, broad tax department or a big, broad securities department. Once we put 10 or 12 of these markets together, now I'm proud to say we have a 50-person federal income tax department that rivals almost any of the big AmLaw 25 firms. And we could never have done that in any one of our markets. So that's our pitch, that this platform there's no one party here that controls this platform. We're like a confederation of states that formed a federal government. And
so as you're building, what's been the greatest challenge as you're kind of building this thing in real time, Bob?
That's a great question. Our biggest challenge is inertia. These firms will go talk to them and they're like, yeah, but we love our independence and we're not sure we want to do anything. The competition for us is usually not another firm. When we go in, it's always this decision. We're either going to merge with Taft or we're going to stay alone. So I call that inertia. There's a lot of firms out there that have chosen independence and then 5 years later, they realize the challenges that they're facing. And so, they may boomerang back, but many times they've already lost some of their key practice groups and it's too late. So that's clearly what impedes maybe some of the better mergers you could find out there. And I think when you ask Chris about other people merging, I note that many of the mergers in the country have resulted in a lot of shrinkage after the merger. You will see big departures, et cetera. Here's what's interesting about Taft. We've never lost any of our partners after a merger that weren't due to retirement or, they were moving on anyway. We've had 100% retention of that. And then secondly, we've grown every one of our merged firms substantially after the merger. The least growth we've run into was 30% in a market, and the highest is almost 200%. So then when we go to the next market, like Morris Manning, they said one of the compelling things about us, in addition to culture, fit, et cetera, was they could talk to the leaders of the 8 firms that merged with Taft and ask any question they wanted and said, did these guys lie to you? Was everything the way they said? How's it been? And that just gives you a lot more credibility when you do the next merger, because they don't want to be a guinea pig.
So if you're growing so fast and so rapidly with your value proposition, what kind of stress and strain is that placing on your current infrastructure to kind of make this thing kind of obviously work on a federated type basis?
A lot. The thing I feel guiltiest about probably is the stress that I put the staff in. I mean, people always ask me about my stress, and I go, I live with stress, and I'm fine, and I'm the one who signed up for it, so I don't feel badly if I'm stressed. I would tell you that the staff gets the brunt of the integrations. And so we're in the talent business, and I would say that means you've got to really be focused on how you're going to acquire your lawyers and your professionals. But just as importantly is acquiring your senior staff, your accounting team, your IT team, and it's a challenge. What we are lucky about is most of our merged firms bring to us a lot of internal talent that then get deployed firm-wide. But catching a tiger by its tail, and we can look at our stats and you can just imagine what this is like. I mean, it's a very difficult thing for the staff to have to keep up. So I'm very consciously aware of that. I try and keep getting the people we need, but there's only so many ways you can make it better. When, we've grown our revenues 550% in 9 years. We've grown our headcount 350% in the same period, and we're now in 12 markets. I think when I became managing partner, we were in probably 5 or 6. And so that's a challenge just at every step of the way.
Yep. Bob, let's talk about something you mentioned to Howard and I as we're prepping for all this. You mentioned your firm is an insurgent firm, and you're thinking about the market in a different way. I'd love for you to riff on that again, and how you talked about how you're modernizing the firm over 20 years. And you were looking at everything. You were changing your approach to everything. And you also described that you think everybody more or less is doing it backwards from what you guys. Can you explain a little bit more about your thinking on that?
So look, if we did things the way we did 20 years ago, there's only one thing I do know. We're doing them wrong. Because the industry has changed. So Wayne Gretzky said, skate where the puck is going, not where it's been. And I like to think Taft skates to where the puck is going. And where I see I'm no genius. I mean, I'm just guessing this the same way you guys are. But as I see the world, I see the Am Law 25 has gotten so expensive, and they're terrific law firms, so don't get me wrong. And they're doing the bet the company work for the Fortune 500, and they probably should be. They've just got such a deep expertise in many areas. But that expensive work is probably not suited for, that pricing is probably not suited for the middle market. So, we had to come up with a better mousetrap. We had to break down our 2-class of partner system and come up with one. We were losing young women who were, raising kids, but they'd look around and they'd see a bunch of older white men as equity partners, and they'd say, and they were only rainmakers. That's all that's most law firms in the country probably still today. And you look at it and they go, I'm 34 years old, I got 3 kids at home, I really am committed to my practice, but I've also got a family to run. And, that group of people doesn't understand me. I don't know if I can really be part of that club. I'm not sure I want to be part of that club. I'm not just going to leave Taft, I'm going to leave the law profession. And we looked at that and said, what do we do about this? So we changed our mindset. We had to break down that aristocracy, the old sort of club. And it took somebody like me who was probably could be perceived as part of it, at that level, and to go on the inside out to break it down and convince them that, a one partner system was going to help us retain people better, give them votes, give them the opportunity to be on the executive committee. I also sort of mandated at the time that we would try and have 50% of our leadership positions be women, because we were hoping we could get 50% of our lawyers to be women. And you look at law schools today, more than 50% of the law students are women. So we had to kind of look at those issues holistically. We came up with our parental leave policy and all the different things, and we came up with the non-headquarter model, which is, every market's the headquarters of its own market, but we want to operate as one firm. So that's a very challenging model to make it work, and we've done that. So people know about me. Don't come in my office and tell me here's how we've always done it, because I can tell you if we've done it for 5 years and you're still saying that we need to look at it harder. So it's a mindset issue. We had to change the fact that we were a law firm and thought of ourselves more as a talent business. I just know this. It's not how many lawyers I hire, it's the which lawyers I hire.
So, Bob, on that point, you're one of the few law firm leaders that have said exactly that, that you recognize you're in the talent business, right? It's the core assets of the partnership in the firm. You spoke to Chris and I about the idea that you see this differently about if you're buying businesses, you're buying, in effect, you're buying laterals who have relationships with clients. Can you sort of talk to us about that?
Yeah, I mean, so I like to say that, if I went out and took my best business development team at Taft and I went to try and chase some new client, you walk out of those meetings, you give yourself a high five, and you go, wow, we had this great meeting, they're going to hire us. Then you get back home and you find out, well, you don't know, so-and-so's father went to grade school with so-and-so's mother, and they have this deep relationship, and they're never going to change their business. And so you find out how hard it is to interrupt a client relationship, even a bad one. People, they know where the bones are buried. There's a comfort level. If I hire a partner who's got that relationship, I get a 98% move over factor of those clients. So it's just a much better way to grow your business. Sometimes you pay headhunters, sometimes you don't. If I was buying a non-law business, I'd be paying X times cash flow or EBITDA. And this is a far less expensive way to grow. It's worked to our advantage. And, we're finding many of these people are worn out with sort of the old firms who've not modernized. So our competitive advantage is that we've modernized from a mindset standpoint. And, we don't have an arrogance that is pervasive throughout the firm like many firms do. We also have a transparency that is remarkable. We give our financial statements every month to every timekeeper in the firm. We look at it like, what are we trying to hide here? Who cares? It takes some courage to do that because you could be good or bad, but once you tell them the truth and they know what's going on, they get this intangible connection to the firm and they feel like they're part of it. And I think that's important. We stemmed attrition from 8%, which is the industry average. We're at 3%. So if you're trying to grow and you've got a 5% difference in attrition, think of that as a hole in the bottom of a bucket you have to fill. And you just constantly are filling it and you're not getting anywhere. And so growth has been the key to our profits, frankly, and the key to our practice groups. So once you decide those things, you've got to gear yourself to saying, instead of what's drawing the clients as a primary focus, it's what's drawing the lawyers to come here. And once they want to come here and they bring their clients, you get that as the dividend. And that's a pretty cool result for a law firm because that's what's grown our revenue so much.
And Bob, you had shared how you addressed partner comp and the partner experience. One, you used the example of you addressed all the issues for that partners don't like. So close comp, two class, equity versus rainmaker. Can you explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so first of all, I think any good compensation system for any law firm requires four things. I think you need to be democratic, which means cross-representation of your different constituencies within the partnership, practice groups, offices, whatever, but you need a broad representative, democratically appointed group. Secondly, it needs to be transparent. When you're not transparent and open, you have a closed system, it may seem convenient at the time to allocate comp. The problem is I have almost no way to do that without somebody distrusting it. You could be doing a terrific job. There still will be distrust because it's not open. So it's convenient, but it's not open, and that creates that distrust. The third thing is I think you have to have a predictable system. People need to know if they do X, they're going to get paid, what that outcome is. And that's especially true if you're trying to hire them from elsewhere because there's a paranoia of the unknown. So making it predictable is a key to the talent acquisition and retention, both at the firm. And then finally, and this has to be paramount over any other factor, it's got to be fair and equitable. And so I always measure it by, what's my least, influential partner who's the least squeaky wheel? Is that party getting fairly paid and proportionate with his peers? Does he have to be best buddies with the managing partner to get paid? I can tell you at Taft, absolutely not. And people have to trust those four factors and the integrity of the system. And once they do that, now you've got a trust factor on everything else. So I think compensation is critical. I think all those elements are critical. And I think we're different in that regard. I mean, I've never had more compliments than our comp system, and I measure it by how many complaints I have. In 5 years, I've had a total of 3 complaints, and the aggregate of those complaints totaled $50,000. That's kind of a remarkable statement.
And Bob, has that open comp been helpful in the lateral markets? Because we hear from other managing partners where the closed compensation just gives them a lot more leverage to obviously not disenfranchise their current colleagues.
Well, so that's certainly one way to look at it. I think you can cut deals. You can cut deals that are outside of your system in a closed comp system easier. But I start with this premise. I don't want to cut deals outside of my comp system, because what happens when the 2-year runway or whatever is over? Now that person's in our system, and now I've got somebody asking for the next deal. My answer is, if you don't fit in the Taft system, we shouldn't get married. So I don't have anything to hide. It's all in the sunshine. If I can't do it in the sunshine, then there's some reason I don't want to do it in the sunshine. And I don't want to cut those deals. I'd rather walk away from some big lateral who doesn't fit here and wish them and say, Godspeed, man, you're a great lateral and you should go to another firm because you want to get paid more for that particular thing. Taft doesn't value it that way. So we shouldn't do this. And there's lots of choices. So I think being in the open sunshine kind of forces you to always apply the fairness concept when you're setting people's compensation. And so that's just a difference in philosophy, Howard. It's not saying I'm right and they're wrong. There are probably more of them than there are me. You're going to find most of my statements, there's more of them than me. I'm an outlier. Even like on space, you asked about that. We don't see downsizing space as a good thing. We don't see putting people in condo offices. I mean, that's just another statement to say, stay away. We want people in the office. So we've gone the other direction. The offices now, we've upgraded. We've made sure people keep their offices. Even if you're here 2 or 3 days a week, you want to have your office. Rent is 3.5% of our gross revenues. I'm not going to spend all of my waking moment trying to make it 3%. I'm going to try and focus on getting the talent here that drives the revenue stream.
So Bob, you being a kind of an outlier, or the firm being an outlier, you being more of a maverick, tell us about your journey into law, because it hasn't been a direct route to do that. You have a really interesting background.
Yeah, interesting, certainly one word, but I will say that it goes back to the word maverick. The toast for me at my wedding was, I'm the only maverick in an otherwise decent family. I took it as a compliment. I don't know if anybody else meant it that way. I do think that I'm more of a business person today than I am a lawyer. I certainly think like that. I had one client say to me one time, please prove to me you actually have a law degree because you don't seem like other lawyers. I think this is a risk management business, not a risk prevention business. And I think many lawyers are in the risk prevention business. They just want to make sure that their backside is covered. I'm more worried about the front side, and I focus on the backside. Secondly, like downside risk. But you can't succeed like we have without taking rational risk. And so I try and make sure the risks we take are rational. I try and promote our lawyers making decisions that, they may fail at times. And I don't want to kill them for failing. I just want to make sure we fall forward and learn from our mistakes and do better the next time. So I think you have to have a culture that promotes rational risk taking without being stupid about it. And that's a fine line. So I left law for 6 years, and it's probably the greatest thing I ever did, because I like to say it was sort of like a combination of getting a Harvard MBA and a West Point degree all in one, and then multiply that times 2. And that probably was the stress level that 6 years in sort of my executive Wall Street position that I had. I just learned a lot from that. And I went through some very difficult times, the company did, and a lot of mergers. And you'll see a pattern. I was employee number 400 at that company. And in 3 years later, we had 8,500 employees and became the second largest finance company in the world, short of GE Capital. So it was
And Bob, can you rewind even further than that? Because I think you kind of come from the accounting kind of, world, and then there's a little bit of Navy aspirations in there. And so it kind of completes the story better.
Yeah, so I was an accounting major I started out as a music and radio TV major, if you can believe it. And then I realized there's no chance I was going to make it in either one of those and make a lot of money. So I decided to go to accounting. My father was the accounting professor of the school. He bet me I couldn't get an A because I was a bit of a slacker the first 2 years, and I enjoyed those first 2 years greatly. So I got it, and that just kind of woke me up, and I kind of really liked accounting, and I liked tax, and I liked all those things. So I ended up going to Arthur Andersen my last year of school and worked in their tax department. It was about 90 hours a week, and I assumed I was going to go to law school at night. And at the last minute, I said, I'm never going to get to law school. I'm never going to make it to class. I'm going to end up with not a great career as a law student. So it'll just be a degree that I add to this, and I'll just stay at the Big Four accounting firm, at that time Big Eight. I also took the Navy pilot exam. This is before Top Gun. I took the officer exam and I passed them. And so I had a choice of either going to Pensacola and learning to fly jets, staying at Arthur Andersen and going to law school at night, or on a whim I had applied at William and Mary on the East Coast for law school, and so I could go there and start full time. So took the CPA exam my senior year during finals. Somehow, luckily, passed it, and started law school. I didn't know I passed it at the time. I started law school 4 days later in the early summer session and decided to go that direction. But it was a metaphorical coin flip. So there's a lot of personalities in there that are split, and I could have gone any way. And today I ride motorcycles that are almost as fast as those jets. But I still exercise that gene a little bit.
I think it's a great story, Bob. I really do.
Yeah. Well, you must not have very many good social friends.
I only talk to 2 people. That's it.
That's it.
So Bob, 10 years out, looking at, say, mid-sized, large, and mega law firms, what opportunities and what threats do you see 10 years out from now?
Yeah, so I see, actually, I would say this is scaled mostly to opportunity. I think the MLaw 25 has done an incredible job starting in about 2000 to morph into these super bulge bracket firms. And the pricing they're getting is amazing. Look at their profits per partner. These guys have done a remarkable job. And the middle market has largely still stayed either local, or there's firms that have gotten bigger without quite our cohesive strategy. I'm not sure that there's not a lot of growth for growth's sake out there, and I'm not being critical. I'm just saying this market is not yet mature in the lane that we're driving in, which is, again, I call the middle market or the tier 3 national pricing that I described earlier. So we're trying to be the leader in that market and focus on that lane. And I think you're going to see many Fortune 500 companies say, look, we need the Kirklands and the Lathams and these terrific law firms for our bet the company stuff. But this more middle market kind of work, our ordinary course work, we've got to find a firm that's a safe choice, that's got the great resources, that is priced at a point where we can afford it for such a volume of work. And I think you're going to see a shift away from those other firms, not for all the work, but for this kind of work. And I think there's plenty of work for everybody. I think what's going to happen is they're not going to want to hire 50 local market firms. I mean, they're going to want to say, nobody got fired for hiring IBM. We want to be that IBM of the middle market, metaphorically. We want to be that safe choice so that they can look at their boardroom and say, look, we're using Kirkland and Latham for our this, or Skadden, or whoever it is for our big stuff. But for our ordinary course work, we're going to Taft, or we're going to one of the other 3 to 5 versions of Taft that are national, super, middle market firms. And we don't know how to do that other than acquiring the local market firms, having them be a key part of our solution, and then growing them with this platform. We don't think we can go throw up a flag in some market and say, hi, we're here. Again, I come back. We're not good looking enough for that. So they're not going to just fall at our feet. We've got to acquire the great long-term relationships of the business community, the charitable community, just community involvement overall, and everything that goes with that, and that loyalty and glue that you get with that, and then get them to convert over a 3 to 5 year period their loyalties to the platform and Taft itself, which has happened, and then bring our resources to support them. So we see the next 20 years, honestly, as a movement of that type of work to firms like us, which is where it's going to belong. So it's fragmented today, and I think that's a consolidation opportunity.
So Bob, on that consolidation point, kind of 2 quick questions. Have you been approached to consider private equity? And number 2 is that something in your plans going forward?
So the new advent of private equity investing in law firms. First of all, Arizona is the only state that allows it from a legal way that you can be certain of, and you have to go through a regulatory approval and do all that. That's one state. Then the other model is this MSO, this management service organization, where they come in like sort of like they do in the corporate practice of medicine, where they come in and they say, well, we'll own all of your admin function, et cetera, and you're gonna bail out X% of your profits to us and all that. So
And you
first
can
of
do
all,
that anywhere. There's no restriction to that.
you can do that anywhere. So the problem with that is people need to understand how law firms operate, and they need to understand our regulatory environment.
Yep.
We have 50 state disciplinary commissions, all of whom have to pass on whether something's a legitimate solution or structure. I can promise you'll get 50 different potential answers with that. We deal with that today just on easy issues. So they're not all consolidated like they would be in the accounting or the medical professions. Secondly, law firms don't exist with some big pool of cash that they can turn over to somebody else and sell. Right now, you'd have to restructure how the law firm pays. I mean, right now, we clean ourselves out every year. It's the only industry I know that rarely invests in itself. At the end of the year, we make sure that for tax purposes and for just maximizing payouts of incomes, most firms clean themselves out. The only way we invest in new things is to put it in the budget and set it aside. So you'd have to free up. Let's say some private equity fund is going to buy 20% of a law firm. You'd have to cut your profits back by 20% and create that available pool of income that could grow for that party to invest in it. And the lawyers won't do that easily. They may seem good at the time, and the converting it into a sale model, that's great. All of a sudden, 2 years later, they'll have forgotten they did that. And then I just think there's a lot of issues with control. Lawyers are control freaks. They won't really like it. I think the MSO model and all that works really well for a national plaintiffs personal injury firm or one of those kind, where you actually do have this sort of actuarially predictable income stream, and you can piece it off, and they're really going to sell the ordinary income they would earn over 10 years and turn it into capital gain. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for that, not for firms like Taft. By the way, we also don't need any capital. It's not like we need somebody to invest for us to do what we're doing. We've got plenty of available cash to do that, and we just budget for it. So I don't think it's going to take over firms like us, where the client relationships are really driven by the lawyers themselves. And let's put the last thing, the last exclamation point on this. Lawyers are not allowed to have non-competes. It's really hard to buy a law firm unless you can really stack it up with heavy non-competes, because you're buying that cash flow, and who drives the cash flow? So that's a long way of saying I think it's a cool idea. I think for the right limited types of firms it works. I just don't think it works for the kind of law firms that Taft is, or any of the big firms are.
So, Bob, please finish this sentence for me. The future is bright because.
I think the future is bright for Taft because of the industry consolidation that I'm going to see happening in the middle market. I think we are largely thought of as one of the leaders, the consolidators, the aggregators of that middle market lane that I keep saying we're driving in. And you want to be a first mover in that. And I would say it this way. I don't think anybody could build our network again in the markets where we are, because there's not really available firms to do it with of the ilk that we merged with. So I think we're well on our way to that. So I think for us, it's a huge, bright future. I think the legal business itself is also bright. I think everybody's afraid of AI, et cetera. I see AI as an opportunity more than I see it as a cannibalization of our business. And I think the foolish ones will resist it as opposed to using it as a strategic weapon for them. So my answer to this is it's all opportunity for us. It's not that there's not downside. We have to be careful and smart in how we do it. But I don't think in terms of this is a big negative going forward. I do think if I was a small firm and trying just to do things the way I've done it for years and years and not changing, I think it's a very risky threat to them. I think they're going to get either eliminated or minimized in many markets, because this is going to be the advent of what's going to happen in the middle market. It happened with the bulge bracket. People need to wake up and understand it, and they either need to get on that train or really run the risk of what I'm talking about.
Agreed.
Yeah. Bob, how can people find you, follow you, contact you on social media?
Well, I try and hide as much as possible so they can't find me. I don't do social media. I never have. My contacts are sort of private, and most of my referrals come from sort of word of mouth. I call it stealth marketing. It's sort of a well-kept secret. I can be reached on my website easily. People know how to get a hold of me, and I figure anybody who really needs me would do that anyway. So,
Great.
Yeah, social media is not the way to get a hold of me. There's many people at Taft who are on social media, and it works for them. But for me, it's just the website.
Excellent. Bob, it's been an honor and pleasure. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you, guys. I love what you're doing and appreciate the time.
Great speaking with you, Bob. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much.